This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to answer the question, should Bitcoin be backed by something? We've all heard of different forms of crypto or tokens, for example, Pax Gold, which is a digital token backed by physical gold. We have USD-backed tokens like USDT, Tether, and USDC, Circle, gold-backed tokens, as we said, like PaxG. Backed just means that you can exchange the token for that thing that is backing it, whether physical gold or US dollars or whatever. A lot of people have forgotten that the US dollar itself used to be backed by physical gold. You could actually go to the US Treasury and exchange a dollar bill for some physical gold. Actually, in the older days, you could even exchange it for silver, at least theoretically for large enough amounts of US dollars. Theoretically, you could have done this up until the Nixon shock of 1971. In the late 60s and early 70s, France said, I have all these US dollars. You're debasing them. I want to exchange them for physical gold. Nixon and the U.S. Treasury said no. And then Nixon suspended the convertibility of the U.S. dollar into gold, thus pushing us in to the modern fiat era, which I'll link to these two articles below, the Nixon shock and this article, which talks about how France actually sent a battleship to the U.S. to take home French gold from the New York Fed's vaults. And then Nixon refused to give them the gold. So this is very, very interesting history. Now, I think the Nixon shock demonstrates the problem with gold-backed tokens, and that is this. The group who issues the tokens can decide at any time that the token is no longer redeemable for gold, just like Nixon did. Here's the problem. If your token or coin or crypto is backed by a real-world asset, then you need one or more trusted third parties to store that asset and also be there to redeem your token for that asset and vice versa. This creates an obvious attack vector. If you own a something-backed token, whether it's backed by dollars or gold or crude oil or whatever it is, you need to trust the issuer to keep its promises. And as we saw, the U.S. did not keep its promises to France and Germany and other countries that were holding U.S. dollars and wanted to exchange them back into gold. You also, if you own a something-backed token, you also need to trust that the issuer itself will not be pressured by a stronger outside party to do the same thing. In the case of the Nixon shock, it was really the U.S. that was the strong party that held all the cards, but we could see another scenario where there's an even stronger party where someone threatens the custodian and says, you need to not redeem this token. So this is the problem with asset-backed tokens or cryptos or currencies. You need trust. So why in the world would we ever want to reinvent this kind of system that has failed again and again? For this reason, something-backed tokens are a pretty dumb idea. They're a great idea if you just want to collect fees. If you're Paxos, for example, and you want to just sit there and collect fees and sort of do this arbitrage, or like Tether, for example, they have all these T-bills. They're earning a lot of money in terms of interest income on the T-bills, and then they let you use USDT. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you want this to be the basis for a new global currency system. We saw how poorly the gold standard performed and how easy it was to overturn it. Now, by contrast, the Bitcoin network is special. It has a native bearer token called BTC, and BTC really just exists on the Bitcoin network. It exists as code, and it exists as a social consensus in the real world among people who hold it. Bitcoin is not backed by US dollars or gold or any other real world assets. And if it were, that would just be another really easy attack vector. If it were backed by something like gold, for example, you just send in some government agents, whether it's US government agents or Chinese or French or German or whatever. You send in government agents to that custodian, or maybe you have some oligarch or billionaire who does this instead of a government, but you basically send someone to that custodian or warehouse or storage facility. You shut it down, you take what's there, you prevent it from being moved out. There are many different ways of doing this. And so if you want to have a distributed, decentralized, censorship-resistant financial network, then you need to have a native bearer token that can be held without counterparty risk and that is not backed by anything in the real world that can be confiscated or controlled or seized. So for example, if you hold your Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, either in single sig or in multi-sig, you have this 12 or 24 word recovery seed, which is the human readable version of your private keys. You have zero counterparty risk. You don't need to rely on a Celsius or a BlockFi or an FTX to give you back your Bitcoin. This is something we've been talking about for years, and it really became concrete to many people as they saw what happened to their Bitcoin that was held at Celsius or BlockFi or FTX or Voyager or whatever in 2022. When you hold your own Bitcoin private keys, your Bitcoin is a bearer asset that cannot be turned off, it cannot be frozen, it cannot be deactivated by anyone. Now, there's another reason that you need a native bearer asset for a network like Bitcoin rather than a real world asset backing it, and that is you need to pay the Bitcoin miners who help to do the proof of work, and in this way ensure that there is an order to the transactions, that there's an order to the blocks. So if I pay Sally first, then I can't pay Billy with those same Bitcoin. And this is one thing that the Bitcoin miners help with. They enable this building of the blockchain and people, the full nodes, being able to see which blocks are valid, which are not. So basically, the Bitcoin builders, they propose these blocks, they do the proof of work, and then the nodes make sure that they're following the rules. So you need a native bearer asset for the network to pay the Bitcoin miners. They're currently being paid a miner subsidy of 6.25 Bitcoin per block, plus transaction fees. And once the block subsidy, the miner subsidy goes away, they will still be able to do fine with transaction fees, assuming there's demand for Bitcoin block space, which I believe there will be. If you pay the Bitcoin miners in US dollars as their miner rewards, then those US dollars could be frozen by the bank before they reach the Bitcoin miner. If you pay them in crude oil or silver or gold or another commodity, you would have to find a way to move those heavy commodities around the world by ship or by air or by rail, and they could be easily intercepted. Or you would need to store the oil, silver, gold, other commodity with a trusted custodian, which itself would become a centralized point of failure, as we've shown with gold. So you need a native bearer asset to pay whomever is securing the network. This is the amazing thing about Bitcoin. It's this elegant, self-contained system. You don't need custodians or other trusted third parties, and you really should hold your own Bitcoin. You should not leave it on an exchange like Coinbase or Binance or FTX or anywhere else. Bitcoin is an elegant, self-contained system. You don't need custodians or other trusted third parties. It's the only true digital bearer asset in the world. I'll repeat that. It's the only true digital bearer asset in the world. There's literally no competitor. Systems like Ethereum have digital tokens, for example, but they are not neutral thanks to the huge pre-mine and thanks to the move to proof of stake. I've showed this many times how Ethereum validators are currently enforcing U.S. government, U.S. Treasury, OFAC compliance on 68% of the blocks over the past 30 days. This is the problem with proof of stake. It's very easy to capture or control the coin after it's moved to proof of stake. And this is the compromise that Ethereum did. They decided to virtue signal and pretend that they're not using a lot of energy, when in fact there's a lot of capital tied up in Ethereum that, for example, could be used to build wind farms or solar farms or whatever you wanted. Instead, it's just sitting there, the 32 ETH sitting there so people can stake. So it's capital is fungible. This is another problem. But what they basically did was they gave up control of their coin for proof of stake and ensured that it would never be neutral again. And the pre-mine makes this even worse because a lot of the beneficiaries of the pre-mine can now just sit on their hands and stake their ETH and get richer and richer. Meanwhile, all the large validators are enforcing US government censorship. Proof of stake is inherently centralizing. You just sit there, you earn more coins, you become bigger and bigger. And as a result, Coinbase and Binance and Lido and all these big stakers have more and more control over the protocol. That's the problem with proof of stake. We don't have to worry about that with Bitcoin because it's proof of work. Here's the Rip Van Winkle test, which I've talked about many times. If you were to fall into a coma for 20 years and then wake up like Rip Van Winkle did, your Bitcoin will remain safe in cold storage because Bitcoin only does soft forks and makes it very easy that you don't need to upgrade if you don't want to. If you fall into a coma for 2 years and you're holding Ethereum, though, you will already Ethereum itself will have already done so many hard forks that your ETH will no longer be accessible. And you're really at the mercy of the devs and whoever decides to unstake your ETH, for example. Ethereum literally changed its entire consensus mechanism from proof of work to proof of stake 6 or 7 years into its history. So this shows that it's not averse to making huge changes in its consensus mechanism and monetary policy that far into its history. By contrast, Bitcoin is very slow moving. It doesn't change, and this is what you want from base layer money. What Ethereum did was basically create a whole new coin when they moved to proof of stake. Here is Or Weinberger. This is a tweet that's been shared quite widely, where he figures out that Ethereum stakers need to wait for this MiCA fella to implement staking withdrawals, and that he might not do that until 2024. Here's the great meme. What do you mean I can't unstake? It looks like Ethereum holders may be able to unstake with the Shanghai upgrade. Again, you can see how much the devs are in control in Ethereum and how the Ethereum Foundation is in control. There may be withdrawals. When you read through this, though, you see how difficult it is to withdraw, and there's no guarantee that this will even take place. It may be delayed for years, just as the move to proof of stake was delayed for years. So the big picture here is Bitcoin has no competitors. Ethereum is not a competitor when it comes to bearer assets and when it comes to neutrality of money. And you certainly don't want to return to an older system where you had a currency backed by a commodity or a precious metal like gold. It failed in 1971, and if you try to do this again, it will fail again. This is the problem with USDC and USDT. They're great to use from a practical perspective if you're in the global south and you don't have access to US dollars. If you have access to US dollars, there's really no reason to hold them, and you have massive counterparty risk. In the case of Tether, you have massive regulatory risk. The US government could finally succeed in shutting them down, and you'd be in big trouble. USDT could blow up overnight if that were to happen. Again, if that happened, that would not affect Bitcoin, the protocol. It might cause Bitcoin to go down quite a bit as people panic, but it would not be a fundamental change. Bitcoin is not dependent on Tether. It's not dependent on gold. It's not dependent on fiat money for its value. It's a self-standing, self-referential system. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.